I think religion is I guess steps, like gives you steps to what to do to reach, to become better, to become a better person. Yes.
Okay, now again, I'm gonna push back because Wayne, you and I run together. We have these conversations. What do you say to the person in the community who says, you know what, I see all the bad that has happened in the name of religion, just in general. I'm a good person. I think I'm doing it all right. You know, I do the good things. I check the good boxes. Do I really need God? What does God add to the discussion that isn't there without?
I would say, I guess, peace. Like I would say peace. Peace, like to understand there's something more than you. Like the promise He gives us. Was it John 3:16? Right? For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Right? Like I feel like that He gives us. He gives us peace, I think.
Now, there's a part of this where my mind is going, and I'm going to save it because I know it's going to come up again. But I think you brought up movements like the Black Lives Matter movement earlier on, and I want to get back to that because I think let's see, that would be day 4. I want to get back into if there is a creator, which I personally believe there is a creator. How does that change my mindset on social issues like the one you mentioned and like others that maybe may come to mind? So let's go to day 3, Isaiah 49 through 11. If you'd read that one for us, Wayne.
You who bring good news to Zion, go up on a high mountain. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up, do not be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and He rules with a mighty arm. See, His reward is with them, and His recompense accompanies Him. He tends His flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lamb in His arms and carries them close to His heart. He gently leads those that have young.
Good. Okay, so this is an exciting one, and whenever I first started talking to these students, I said, one major focus of this lesson that I found was God communicating with us. And I know growing up in a church family, there are certain language that I would hear on a regular basis, but I don't know if that language necessarily resonates with young people. I don't think that it resonates with people that are not from a faith-based background. And so this was a really important question that I found. How have you experienced God trying to guide you? Do you think God communicates with individuals differently?
I think He can guide us in a lot of ways. Like us on campus, we have chapel every day. Someone's there talking about God at least once a day. Almost every class period, we start off with prayer. So it's good to know that God is at the beginning of everything that we do, and we should end the day with God too, saying a prayer or something like that.
Now, I don't know how unique this is, but I know that at Lodi Academy, Pastor Little has made an emphasis, or has emphasized student leadership in chapel. So can you kind of explain what that is like to people that may be joining us who have never been to a Lodi Academy chapel? We have it every day, but at least once a week we have a student lead out.
Right, so Lodi Academy Chapel. So every Tuesday is student-led chapel. A student comes up, and during this period, they share a personal story. They share a testimony or something that can reach out to other students. And as this verse is saying, God is the shepherd, and we are His sheep, and He's guiding us. And so you can really see God guiding the students at our school through these student-led chapels. I know that going to Lodi Academy has opened so many doors for me throughout leadership, and it's something that has only happened by God's grace. And so this leadership has given me a voice throughout the different things happening in our world, throughout protests or throughout the pandemic. It's given me a Christian voice, and a Christian worldview where I can speak out about those things that I get from his word. And so it's just important as youth that we let God guide us. And so chapel and using our voice as teenagers to talk to other students is really important. And I think that that's what God guides us through.
And I can speak personally as a member of the staff at the academy, how many times I've been able to go to chapel and be led. I don't know if students always think of it that way, because I know whenever I was in your seats, my mindset was I was speaking to the students. I didn't think about speaking to the teachers, right? And I can just tell you from personal experience, the amount of times that I've gone to chapel and I've needed something and it's been provided by a 16-year-old is pretty amazing. And so for me, answering this question, how have I experienced God guiding me in a plethora of ways, including definitely not absent from that would be my students. It's easy for me to say that we've got good students, and I know that I'm a biased opinion, but I see God working through them, not just guiding your classmates, but also guiding the staff, because you guys have a unique perspective on life that we are out of touch with. Yeah.
Yeah, and in chapel, it also happens through like praise band. And so I know that one of the questions was, do you think God communicates to people differently? And I think that he does, depending on the person. So I think that God can communicate through, music. And if you have music talents and you really feel God through like a praise band, or through acts of service, like the community service that we do, or through a sermon, or through prayers, or through devotions with God. And so I feel that God does communicate with people differently, and it really matters that you know yourself and that you know what the best way that you hear God is, and you really put your time into that, because that is how God can communicate and guide you.
Now old people like me sometimes have a hard time with young people like you, because you have these new ideas, you have these new approaches that do not speak to me. So how can you go about, maybe a more practical way of looking at this question is, how can you go about communing with people that do not experience God the same way that you do, and how can you guard yourself from those pressures to say, oh, you know what, that's not the way that I grew up experiencing it, therefore it can't be a legitimate experience for you. How do you think is the best way to approach when a person, in my position says, those drums are not how I experience God, right? How can you go about that in a tactful way to prove to a person, God does speak to people differently, and maybe this is a legitimate way that God has reached out to me? This is a question I did not tell you about. This is something that I've heard my entire career of 10 years of teaching, is students who come to me and they say, these people just don't get it. And these people are always my age or older. It's never like their age, right? So this is a constant dilemma for the youth as you guys are coming up in the church and you're taking on leadership. There's always going to be kickback from people like me who don't see it the same way. So how do you go about saying to that person, God does speak to us individually. God does know our hearts. He knows where we are at. And this is a way that I've communicated, I found a means of communication with God.
I think through prayer and testimony, perhaps, like sharing your story and why your communication with God is like that and how it became to be like that. Because the more that you engage in that conversation with someone and you back it up with scripture and prayer, I think the more that they would understand why you feel God in that way. And if you pray that their hearts may be open to understanding worship in a different way, and if you pray yourself, how can I communicate to this person, God? What words can I get out that will make this person understand my way of worship? I think that that's something that can break down a barrier and that can really improve that sense of understanding.
And I think it stands to reason that if God is going to communicate with you in a unique way, he's going to, if you are earnest in your endeavor, he's going to show you a way to communicate that with your community, right? Because why would God speak to you in a way and then not give you a way to translate that to a person who's questioning, right? Kind of like that mindset of, God's not going to put you into a position that you're not prepared for, right? So when you find yourself in hardship, you know that you have been prepared for that because God wouldn't allow that to happen to you if he didn't think that you were ready, right? Day 4, as in your class experience with me, I'm speaking too much. Day 4, Isaiah 40, 12 through 31. I'm gonna hit on a few points here. Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? Who else knows the weight of the earth, or who has weighted out the mountains and the hills? Who is able to advise the Spirit of the Lord, who knows enough to be his teacher or counselor? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instruction about what is good or what is best? No. For all the nations of the world are nothing in comparison with him. They are but a drop in the bucket, dust on the scales. He picks up the islands as though they had no weight at all. All Lebanon's forests do not contain sufficient fuel to consume a sacrifice large enough to honor him. All Lebanon's sacrificial animals would not make an offering worthy of our God. And it continues. I teach world history, and I know that I can be kind of overwhelmed with politics, global politics. And Isaiah 40, 12 through 31 really emphasizes the grandeur of the Creator. So the question is, why is creation and a Creator so important? And I told you that we were going to come back to this topic. So in your opinions, why is a Creator who has created important for your beliefs?
It gives reassurance that we're not just here for no reason or purpose, right? Because I've met people who thought that there's no purpose to life, and I found them like really unhappy people. There's been exceptions, but most of them are unhappy people, and I feel the assurance that yes, there is a God. He created us, and He has something for all of us. Is happy feeling.
And he wakes us up every morning for a reason. Like, I believe he wakes us up so that we can keep on spreading his word in our actions and everything. And to me, I kind of want to share a story about one time when I was kind of wondering why God would let these things happen to me. It was I'll always remember this night. I was just laying in bed, and I just didn't know what to do, and I just decided to start praying. And I was praying, and after I prayed, not even 5 seconds after I prayed, I got a text from one of my friends. It doesn't really, I don't text them all that often, so it was kind of unusual to get a text from them, and they just texted me, not knowing anything that was happening in my life, saying that, we're praying for you. I just felt like God was speaking to me, and my family wanted to pray for you, and that, we're just going to keep you in our prayers. So that gave me reassurance that God is there and that he's going to be with me through all my challenges in life.
I think that a creator is so important to our faith and our message right now because these verses really highlight that he is greater than our leaders today. He's greater than our country leaders and our world leaders. And I feel that this creates a sense of comfort because in a world that's full of political unrest or climate catastrophes and things around the world, we're able to know that there is an everlasting God, that there is a greater leader, that there is somebody who is trying to save us and will never stop trying to get our salvation. And so this is something that we should share with the world. This is something that we should shout out on mountains, that we have a leader who is greater above all on the earth, one who will truly care about us and that we can 100% trust. And so I feel that it's hard today with everything going on to trust something, but we know that there is a greater leader that we can put our comfort in.
The way that you said that reminded me of a professor I had in college who was from the former Republic of Yugoslavia. And it's not Yugoslavia anymore. That country doesn't exist. It's been broken up into many countries. And if I were him, I would kind of feel like, the cliche, the man without a country. And that would be very unsettling for me to not have something as grounding as, where are you from? When a person goes up, to Dr. Stefanovic and says, where are you from? What do you say? Do you say a place that doesn't exist anymore? That would be very, there would be no foundation there for me to have to answer that question if I didn't have a place that still existed. And I find an incredible amount of comfort with this idea that there is something greater that I'm grounded in, right? That even though geopolitical lines, boundaries change, for example, this doesn't change. Now going back to the question on movements that you guys have seen, have witnessed in your lifetimes in the last 12 months, do you think there's any value in this conversation as a part of a greater conversation about individuality? What might this contribute to the conversations we're having about the value of individuals?
Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. As I witness, as a history teacher, it's a part of my job, but as I sit back and I watch the news on a daily basis and I see people asking the question about an individual's value, I want to scream and I want to say, if you would recognize a creator, a lot of these questions dissipate. A lot of these questions become more clear. No matter where you are on the spectrum of political belief, recognizing that there's a creator changes the conversation, right? So, how might the acknowledgement of a creator with a purpose in their creation shape the way that we are talking about one another today?
Well, these verses kind of say that he increases the power of the weak. And so maybe in the news today, when we're thinking about individuality and who gets what and who matters and who doesn't, God is saying, I care about the least of these. And I give power to the weak. And I will not grow tired. And I will not grow weary of taking care of you and your importance and making you matter, even though other people in the world might give up on trying to make you matter and your importance. But there is a Savior, there is the King of the earth who will never grow tired and weary of your importance and of making sure that you're cared for. So,
yeah, I've known, and I say this in class often, we all have biases. I think it's unfortunate that some people try to operate as if they don't have biases in life. We all have biases. And I think one of the more important accomplishments of an individual is to recognize the bias and then put it in check. To say, okay, I recognize that I have this political belief, and I do. I have political beliefs. And then it's confronted from time to time with the word. And I say, wow, okay, my bias on this situation does not line up with God's instruction. What do I do with that? And it can be very unsettling, honestly, and maybe you guys haven't experienced this as much, but it can be very unsettling when you realize that your bias is in contradiction with God's instruction. And how do you deal with that? For example, in our community, the Lodi community, we have a lot of homeless. It's increasing since I've lived here. And I can come up with all the political reasons imaginable to explain that. But ultimately, if I come back to the creation mindset, no matter why I think or the excuse that I may come up with for why people are in the condition that they are, if I'm honest with myself and I come back to this question, the Isaiah 40 explanation of God's creative nature, I recognize that even though there may be things about their situation that is unsettling for me, I'm still recognizing, at least on a very fundamental level, their created background, right? That they are created by the same God that created me, and that upsets my political beliefs. So how do I deal with that, Wayne? When I recognize that my biases are in contradiction with the Creator and His creation, what do I do?
I guess like looking at other people, like listening to other people's stories, like what we do in class when you ask we watch the news and we listen to other students talk about what they thought and why they think that. I guess it helps broaden our perspective. So yes, yeah.
Personally, I find that no matter where you are in your worldview, I personally feel for people who do not come from a theist perspective, because I think the life would be very, very difficult to not have that mindset that, just with the example that you gave with racial tensions in the country, recognizing, as Dr. King did, the created fundamental of every individual changes the way that you look at a person. No matter where they are on the political spectrum, when you recognize that very basic thing that we all have in common, at least I believe we have in common, you go about that conversation differently than if you're thinking of it purely from a political perspective. Okay, I was talking to one of you before we started about day 5, so I really want to make sure that we save enough time for it. Isaiah 41:29, and I'll read that one very, very quickly. 41:29. See, they are all foolish, worthless things. Your idols are all as empty as the wind. Question for you: what kinds of idolatry do we face as a church today? Does this appear in more subtle forms? If so, how?
In my early years, I used to watch programs in
church.
So I used to watch pastors they preach let's say for 30 minutes, 20, and then they as a demonstration they bring people onto the center, and they have I guess I'll say fake miracles happen. They just stand up and walk, and they just start talking about how it's only because of their belief, and then after the whole thing it cuts for an hour 20 minutes, an hour 30 minutes to 20 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, yeah, they're just talking about money and how if we help the church, it helps the pastor spread. I don't know, it just felt so inauthentic. It felt like the whole purpose of the whole church was to make money. So I thought it was kind of a form of adultery.
I think that when we usually think of idolatry and idolizing things, we might think of, finances or goals. But I think that it can go a lot deeper, even subconsciously in the church. We may idolize our own tradition and our own comfort over the changes that God might be taking throughout time or throughout history. We may see things a certain way and take comfort in that and start to idolize that certain tradition. And so if we idolize our own traditions and needs and comforts in the church, we may be taking away or limiting from the work that God is trying to accomplish. And so we can idolize our phones or our money or our goals before God, and that's not okay. But idolizing our comfort and our traditions may just be as bad. And so anything that we put before God's needs and His work, or anything that we value above Him, is idolizing something. And so it's important to not idolize tradition or comfort, but to be open to new ways that God might be trying to change.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And I would, but again, I would push back, and I would say if I was maybe not a member of our church, maybe not a member of our faith community, and you say, well, hey, like, God hasn't come back, right? So are you guys putting your hopes in the wrong thing? And why does it matter if I put my time and my energy into my life goals? Because I can see those, I can recognize the growth there. How do you convince a person of something that people in the Bible were waiting for, believing was going to happen in their lifetime? My teachers growing up, they thought that it was going to happen in their lifetime. I'm hoping that it happens in my lifetime. How do you convince a person to change their focus from something that they can see physically to something that is invisible? Or is it?
I think maybe looking back at past experiences that you've had and ways that God has worked throughout your life, so miracles that have happened in your life. I'm sure that all of us have experienced miracles. I have, especially, even with my sister when she had brain cancer, and, he healed her. And so that's the importance of keeping hope and faith, because you see God work through people. And so it's important to realize that he is working, and even if we might not be able to physically see him and we might want to go our own ways, it's important to recognize what he has done in your life and to keep that faith and hope.
I think you've hit on something very, very important that we often forget as church people, and that is, and that's why I finished off that question with, or is it? Meaning, is it invisible? And I think we have to recognize our part in the plan, our role in God's message being spread to the world. People may look at us and say, you're worshiping something that is invisible. And maybe our response needs to be, no, it's standing right in front of you talking, right? Our experiences are powerful. Our experiences are, it's what's going to show people a physical connection to God, I believe. Thank you. As I experience every day in class, I'm learning with you guys, and I try to frame it that way. And you guys were very brave to step up to this plate. And from my generation and I believe older generations, I just want to thank you personally for your willingness to do this, your willingness to step up to your leadership roles in this church. And I feel very good about the direction our church is going with you in at the helm. So thank you for your willingness to do this. All right, that's it. We're done. Now the fun begins. Kindergartners, we are going to hear of the story of Lazarus. Lazarus come out, and following that, the primary Sabbath school group is going to hear about God wins again, and I am really glad to hear that. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, boys and girls. This is Aunt Fernita, and I have a wonderful story for you called Lazarus Come Out. The memory verse for today is John chapter 11, verse 5. It says, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. The message for today's story is Jesus does what is best for us. Has someone you love been sick? So sick that they died? The Bible tells us about two sisters who didn't want their brother to die. They wanted Jesus to help him. Mary looked at her sister Martha with frightened eyes. I wish Jesus were here, she said softly. He could heal our brother Lazarus. Martha squeezed the cool water out of the cloth and laid it on Lazarus's forehead. Let's send a message to Jesus. Let's ask him to come. Mary and Martha sat beside their brother's bed. They did everything they could to make him feel better, but nothing seemed to help. And soon, Lazarus died. Mary and Martha cried bitterly. Where is Jesus? Where is Jesus? Mary wailed. Martha's servant finally found Jesus and told him that his friend Lazarus was terribly sick. But Jesus did not hurry to Lazarus's house. He stayed in the town where he was teaching for 2 more days. Finally, Jesus told his disciples, "Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there. Now you will have another opportunity to believe in me." Jesus and his disciples set off for Lazarus's house. When Jesus arrived, Martha cried, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus spoke kindly. "Your brother will live again. Where did you bury him?" Mary and Martha led Jesus to the cave where Lazarus was buried. A big stone blocked the doorway. Jesus stood there, and he cried. "See how much he loved Lazarus?" someone whispered. Suddenly, Jesus said, "Roll away the stone." "Lord, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days," Martha exclaimed. But she ordered the servants to roll the stone away. Jesus looked up to heaven and prayed, "Father, I know that you always hear me, but I am saying these things out loud because I want all these people to know that you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out." Everybody gasped. What was Jesus doing? "Look," someone shouted, pointing to the cave. Lazarus stepped out of the cave, just as Jesus had commanded. Lazarus was alive again. "Take the grave clothes off of him," Jesus said. Mary and Martha ran to meet Lazarus, and they cried tears of joy. The disciples now knew why Jesus had not rushed to heal Lazarus. He had a very special plan to show people that he really, truly was the Son of God. Jesus has a plan for our lives too. We can trust him to do what is best for us.
This podcast.
Hi everyone, it's Aunt Fernita and we're studying Lesson 8. God Wins Again. The message is, when God wins, we are winners. This week, our memory verse is, "Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Psalm 23, verse 6. I won! Mikhail shouted. "I made the final point!" His teammates frowned and turned away. Recess was over. It was time for Bible class. Here's the story they studied. What do you think Mikhail might have learned? David and his 600 men marched from the city of Ziklag to help Achish, the Philistine king, fight a battle. But the Philistine princes would not let David and his men help, so they had to turn around and march all the way back to Ziklag. As Ziklag appeared in the distance, the men were shocked to see the smoke rising. While they were gone, the Amalekites had attacked and burned their city to the ground. Their wives, children, and cattle were all gone. All that was left was smoke and ashes. "It's all your fault, David," the men accused. "You should have left soldiers here to take care of our families." David was upset too. He had lost some of his own family. Now the men were blaming him. What should he do? David's first thought was to turn to God. He knew God would show him what to do. "Bring the ephod." He told Abiathar the priest. "Shall we go after the Amalekites?" David asked the Lord. "Will we reach them and get our families back?" The ephod had 2 large gemstones on it. When the priest asked a question of God, one of the stones would glow as if the answer was yes. And that is what happened. "Go," the priest said. "You will reach them and get everything back again." So David and his 600 soldiers set out to find the Amalekites. But when they reached the Besar ravine, they stopped. 200 soldiers were just too tired to go any farther. So David left them to rest and guard the supplies. A little farther on, David and his men found an Egyptian lying in the field, a slave to one of the Amalekites. He had been abandoned because of illness. He was weak from hunger and thirst. David and his men gave him some water and food, and then asked the man to help them find the Amalekites. So the Egyptian led David to the Amalekite camp. From a distance, they watched the Amalekites eating and drinking, celebrating their victory. David and his men attacked the Amalekites at sunset. The battle lasted all night and the next day. When it was over, the Amalekites were defeated. Only 400 men escaped on their camels. David and his men rescued everything and every person that had been stolen from Ziklag. David and the soldiers collected their families, their possessions, and their animals. They gathered things that they had captured from the Amalekites and began the long walk home. As they neared Besar ravine, the 200 men who had stayed behind came out to meet them. But some of David's weary soldiers were not glad to see how rested their friends looked. "We'll give these men back their wives and their children," they grumbled, "but nothing else. They didn't help us win, so they shouldn't share the goods." "Wait," David said. "Who won this battle? We didn't win. The Lord did. He gave us this victory. He protected us. So all will share alike." And that's the good news of God's grace. When God wins the battle, He shares the victory. We are all winners because Jesus won the victory over sin and Satan.
Created and produced by Falvo Fowler. This podcast is read by Franita Buddy Fullwood for Gracelink.net. Animation and artwork by Giogo Godoy. Audio